Reverse by Black K. Cat. Chapter 57. Sibylline. The Hokage's office hasn't changed much at all, Kusina thinks with amusement. She's the first one through the door, the rest of the Kage is still on the stairs behind her, but she isn't about to slow herself down for their sakes. She's not about to do anything for their sakes, honestly. It's hard not to stare at the picture of Minato hanging in place of pride against the wall, stately in his Hokage robes but mischievous in the curve of his smile. To Kushina, he's barely a week dead, and it hurts like something torn open, like the shock of coming to life again. Naruto was her newborn baby, but he's also 6 years old. Itachi is 11. Kushina herself is technically 30. She can still see the scars in the village where the Kyuubi tore through. She can mark its path in the minutes before she and Minato stopped it, and it makes something go cold inside of her to see the evidence so long after it happened clear in the light of a fading day. But the Kyuubi, or part of it, was the first person to actually care for Naruto the way she hoped someone would. And in the face of that, there's only weariness. Jiraiya should have taken Naruto. That's the entire reason they named him Godfather in the first place. It would have been nice if Mikoto or Inuishi or Tsume could have raised him, but it was Jiraiya's duty. It was what he promised them, and Kushina tries not to dwell on the sharp sting that's almost like betrayal. Of course, ignoring painful emotions is something she's had a wealth of practice at. With a quiet huff, Kushina ignores the sounds of approaching voices and looks for the perch she used when she was Anbu. It's still there, a little ledge above one of the windows that juts out just a little bit further than the rest, discovered in a fit of utter boredom. Kushina leaps for it, catching the edge of the wood easily and twisting. It burns faintly in her muscles as she flips herself up with little momentum to help her, but she remembers the trick of it well, and by the time the door swings open under Sarutobi's hand, Kushina is sitting high enough up to watch the Kage file in. To someone who knows him, the sharp flicker of Sarutobi's eyes as he scans the room for her is obvious, and Kushina gives him a toothy grin when he spots her at exactly the moment she expects. He's remembering. Sarutobi doesn't say anything to her, though the faint roll of his eyes is already eloquent. He simply collects his pipe from his desk and turns to face the others.
Thank you for coming, Yagura. You've had a long journey.
Yagura harums, passing his staff over to Mei and tipping his head at the door. Her mouth pulls unhappily tight, but she bows and retreats towards the other guard without a word.
It ended up being rather more of a trial than we predicted,
the Mizukage says, folding his arms across his chest. A, who has one eye on his brother and whose expression says it's going to be that way for the near future, makes a sound of skeptical amusement. That why you're turning up with prisoners in tow?
A cud scheme,
Yagura clarifies.
The paths of pain have been nullified. Kakuzu of Taki is dead.
You think Taki has some part in this? The hitman blusters, pushing past the Kazekage to loom over Yagura.
Lies and slander.
Purple eyes narrow, and Yagura takes a breath.
Step back,
he orders, low and sharp. Chakra suddenly boils around him like being dropped into a drowning sea, and a faint blue-white glow limns him.
I don't care if your village can rival the 5 great nations. My patience is as short as it's ever been, and I warn you now. Testing it will have consequences.
Taki's headman takes 4 rapid steps back, face going as pale as his hair. There's a long moment of tense silence before Rasa snorts softly.
I see Uzumaki Kurama's influence has invaded even the bloody mist.
Kushina bristled, because if he's going to say the name of her clan, it had better be in a more respectful voice than that! But before she can even open her mouth, Yagura beats her to it.
The only influence in my life before Kurama reached Kiri was the charming on of some rogue Uchiha with delusions of world conquest,
he says sharply, and even though he's the shortest person in the room, for a moment it feels like he's looking down his nose at all of the other Kage.
Kurama removed that. So tell me, Kazekage, just what influence you're talking about.
Mei, just barely in Kushina's line of sight through the open door, groans and starts thumping her head against the wall. The Kazakage's main guard gives her a look of pained sympathy, and if their leaders weren't about to go for each other's throats, Kushina is pretty sure he'd pat her on the shoulder in commiseration.
He's starting some sort of Jinchuriki rebellion.
Rasa splutters.
We have every right to be concerned. The balance of power.
It's complete and utter crap! Kushina puts in helpfully and laughs when the Taki headman and Abel touches surprise and spin to look for her. She leans forward to smirk at them, hands braced on the window frame beneath her, and catches Rasa's eye, though her words are for all of them. How many times did you use the Ichibi when you were at war with Konoha? Rasa blinks, though he takes a step back so he can look at her more easily. Yagura regards her as well, and she can tell by the slant of his expression that he knows precisely where this is going. Kushina is glad. It's something she spent years thinking about, across corpse-littered battlefields and beside weak campfires in the dark. Mito might have had the edge of being the first Jinchuriki, but Kushina was one of the first born to it. She knew right from the beginning that it was her duty to take up the burden when Mito died, and it might have scared her, but that just made her consider all the angles. Kushina doesn't like being scared of things, and she likes even less being scared because she doesn't understand. Now, years and an entire lifetime away from where she started thinking, and the only answers she's ever managed to find aren't nearly good enough.
We never used the Ichibi in the war,
Rasa says, as if he's offended by the very question.
If we had, Konoha would have...
He trails off as if remembering who he's talking to, but Kushina just gives him a toothy smile and claps her hands together. Right, she agrees tearfully. They would have used the Kyubi. Onoki scoffs, giving Kushina a dark look as he leans back against the wall.
Exactly why Konoha kept the Kyubi for themselves, he says, bitingly derisive. Your Shodame acted the saint, parceling the Biju out among the other villages, but he only did it because he knew that one way or another they would try to follow Konoha's footsteps. His way, he could control precisely how strong each of his enemies were.
Senju Hashirama,
Sarutobi says dryly,
was a great many things, and a wise man among them, but he was not some sort of cunning manipulator, I can assure you.
He takes a long pull at his pipe, sinking down into his chair, and glances up at Kushina with a raised eyebrow that prompts her to continue. Kushina offers him a tip of one shoulder in reply, halfway between a shrug and an unvoiced sigh. Means it didn't work, right? If Jinchuriki are supposed to keep villages at about the same power level, it failed, and if they're supposed to keep the villages from fighting, that didn't work either. When A opens his mouth, she narrows her eyes at him. You don't get to have an opinion, Mr. My Village tried to steal a third Jinchuriki. A pauses, staring suspiciously at her, and then his eyes widen. You! He says as if deeply offended. You're the Jinchuriki girl my father tried to kidnap. Kushina wiggles her fingers at him, smiling sweetly. Sarutobi is very conspicuously not laughing, though she can see the faint tip to the corner of his mouth as he regards her tolerantly.
What you're saying is that having Jinchuriki as a threat to keep the peace is useless. So a rebellion matters little.
He extrapolates, used to piecing through her logic, probably from having to do the same in her mission reports. Kushina's style tends to run towards, stuff happened, I did other stuff, and then celebrated with ramen, which is really not her fault, reports are boring. Exactly! Kushina tips forward a little more, red hair swinging around her, and the sight of it makes her smile, even if the expression is a touch bittersweet. She doesn't look at Minato's portrait on the wall, even though she wants to. Damn it, but she misses the airhead so much, and every single thing in Konoha is always going to remind her of him. Determinedly, she pushes down in the ache in her chest, thinks of Naruto, and takes a breath. The logic is flawed, the Taki headman tells her sharply. The Hachibi's Jinchuriki remains with Kuno, and the Kyubi's Jinchuriki remains with Konoha, which means they will also control the next hosts. I won't stand for his son, Sarutobi says in that particular patient tone that means he's about to stop being patient and start breaking open skulls instead.
Do you see any Jinchuriki except for B in this room?
Not part of your plan, but they're all on the lam. B agrees cheerfully, ignoring the dirty look he shoots him. Might think they're from your villages, but they're really just Kurama's kids. Rasa looks especially grim at that bit of wisdom, and Kushina can't help laughing, though there's only dark humor in it. Yeah, she agrees. Naruto loves his uncle, and Gaara's such a cuddlebug, of course he's going to stick with my brother. Fu thinks he's the best thing ever, and if Yugito gets any more devoted, we're going to start finding shrines. They were all definitely Kurama's. I think you suckers lost your chances. Three Faces turns sour and Onoki scowls. Sarutobi presses a hand over his face and sighs. Kushina. But it's not the kind of tone that means stop. So Kushina just grins and opens her mouth to... Let me... Please, I just want to get through really quickly. No, I know there's a meeting going on, but 5 minutes, that's all. Protocol? I know the protocol, but just this once. Look, no. Damn it, I was on move at 14. I know the damn protocols. But you're going to let me through anyway, or I'm going to show you why I was on Boo's Busted Tear for 7 years, you imbecile! Kushina almost falls off her perch. It's a voice she knows just as well as her own Ormanato's. The cadence, the tone, the words, the threats, they're all familiar, and before she can even think about it, Kushina is leaping down, bolting across the room and out the door. At the top of the stairs, a wary Anbu guard is backing away from a small woman with fire in her eyes and fury on her face. Seeing her feels like home, familiar and safe in a way not even Naruto is quite yet. It's like no time at all has passed, and to Kushina, 6 years out of time in a way that has no cure. It's a balm she hadn't even known she needed. Mikoto! She cries and practically trips over her own feet as she lunges for her best friend. Mikoto's head snaps around, and in a blur, she's shoving past the startled guard, running to meet Kushina, and they collide in a tangle of limbs and air, hugging viciously as they cling to each other in the middle of the floor. Kushina can't tell if she's laughing or crying, or even which she wants to do. All she knows is that Mikoto is here, she's fine, she wasn't killed when the Kyuubi broke free. Because Kushina knows Mikoto. As soon as the village was in danger, retirement or not, she must have been out on the front lines, holding the Kyuubi back and protecting her home. She wouldn't be Mikoto if she tried to do otherwise. You're alive! You're alive! You're alive! Mikoto breathes in her ear, and her arms are impossibly tight around Kushina. In the market, someone said they'd seen you, but I couldn't believe. But it is you! Oh, Kushina! Kushina laughs a little, even though she doesn't try to let go either. Shinobi gossip worse than washerwoman. She ups, and it's a familiar complaint that makes Mikoto laugh too, watery but warm. I'm so glad, Mikoto says, pulling back just a little. She frames Kushina's face with her hands, then leans forward, dropping her forehead against Kushina's shoulder and letting out a shaky breath. Gods, Kushina, you died, and I couldn't even say goodbye. And Naruto was there, but I couldn't do anything, not as an Uchiha, and he had a guard, so I couldn't even sneak close, and... Kushina's heart aches just a little. She remembers what Kurama said, listing everyone's excuses. Rumors started up that the Uchiha were the ones who brought the Kyuubi down on the village, so of course the Uchiha clan head's wife couldn't take in a human container. She had scoffed inwardly at the time, because surely things couldn't be that bad, but... They are, and it hurts that things could have fallen this far. Even so, she smiles, wraps her arms around Mikoto's shoulders and holds her tightly. I'm here now, she reminds her. I wish Naruto could have grown up with you, and I'm definitely going to kick someone's butt for that. But Kurama found him, and he's happy now. He's happy, and we're back, and we're not going anywhere, Mikoto, I promise. Mikoto takes a breath that shudders like a sob, shaking in Kushina's grasp. Her hands fisting Kushina's shirt and ease. And she says in a voice that's only a little choked, Don't make promises like that, idiot. Just stay, all right? Another breath, steadier this time, and she straightens, shoving her hair back out of her face, but ignoring the tear tracks that streak her cheeks. A pause, and then she asks, Kurama? My brother! Kushina says brightly, just for the long, slow, baffled blink that has always been Mikoto's expression of bewilderment. My baby brother!
She adds gleefully just because she can and makes a mental note to use that phrase around Kurama at the next available opportunity.
A slow shake of her head, and then Mikoto laughs, rueful and relieved and warm and wonderful.
Only you, she says fondly, and it's a phrase Kushina heard from her at least once a month from the time they were academy students. She has to grin, and Mikoto smiles back, an entire world worth of things in her eyes that she doesn't need to say aloud for Kushina to hear. Behind them, Sarutobi pointedly clears his throat, sounding like this isn't the first time he's done it, and Mikoto instantly flushes a little. In the same heartbeat, though, she squares her shoulder, sidesteps Kushina, and bows to the Hokage without a single ounce of remorse on her face. "Forgive me, Hokage-sama. I was overcome with joy," she says, managing not to sound apologetic even as she apologizes. It's a talent Kushina has always envied.
"So I see."
Sarutobi agrees mildly, but he sounds indulgent rather than annoyed.
"Could she not were it any less urgent, I would happily let you go. But I believe there are things beyond your half-brother's wisdom that we need to discuss."
"I'll wait," Mikoto says firmly before Kushina can do more than open her mouth. She hugs Kushina one more time, then steps back, strides past the weary Anbu, and takes a seat in one of the simple chairs like a queen ascending her throne. Innate Uchiha dramatics, Kushina thinks fondly, grinning to herself, and lets Sarutobi lead her back into the office and close the door. "Kurama, where are we gonna go now?" Naruto asks, tugging on Kurama's sleeve. "Can we go to the park? I want to swing!" Kurama rolls his eyes, but before he can answer, Kakashi says, just a little despairing, "You ate 7 bowls of ramen. Don't you want to sleep now?" Kurama snorts loudly. "Right," he says dryly. "You've clearly never dealt with children." Whereas Kurama has technically been one twice now, or at least been in the back seat for 2 childhoods. "Come on, Kit. We'll go running off." Naruto cheers, then grabs Gaara's hand and tugs him out of the ramen stand. "Later, old man! Thanks for the ramen!" Tauchi laughs as they go, waving after him.
"I haven't seen him this happy before,"
he tells Kurama, and his smile is warm and just faintly grateful.
"It's good to see my favorite customer doing well."
Kurama gives him a crooked smile in return, letting Fu hang onto his hand as she slides down from her stool.
"Thanks,"
he answers, and means for more than the cook's words and the ramen. Waving him off, Teuchi disappears into the back, and Kurama glances around for anything that's been abandoned. Well, besides them, since Naruto and Gaara are both a good distance down the road and don't appear to be stopping. Yukito follows his gaze, then hurries after them without Kurama asking, easily catching up and falling into step. She leans down a little, listening as Naruto chatters at her, and Kurama couldn't fight a smile if he tried.
"Konoha is in for a lot of readjustments,"
Kakashi remarks. He's also watching the 3 Jinchuriki, but his expression is closer to wry than anything else. It takes effort not to say they deserve a heck of a lot worse. But Kurama manages it. If only barely. Not that he cares, but if they're going to be living here, it's probably better not to throw all of his hostility out in the open immediately. Sliding his hands into his sleeves, Kurama snorts quietly. Even if they don't, Naruto isn't going to care. Not as much, anyway. He's got the other kids now, and Kushina. "And you?" Kakashi gives him a sidelong look, then pulls out his dog-eared copy of Ichi-Ichi, flips to a random page, and determinedly buries his nose in it. Just for a moment, Kurama contemplates snatching the book and setting it on fire. Too much effort for too little payoff, he concludes, though Kakashi likely has other copies, and it will be a temporary inconvenience at best. Still, a thought for later. Later being the next time Kakashi pisses him off. So, about 10 minutes or so from now. "Can I have another piggyback ride, Kuramani?" Fu asks, hanging off of his elbow and looking up with a wide, pleading gaze. Kurama lets her see him pointedly rolling his eyes, but sighs in surrender. With a bright laugh, Fu scales his back like it's a mountain, wrapping her arms around his neck and leaning forward to see over his shoulder. "You're the best, Kuramani."
"You only say that when you get your way,"
Kurama grumbles, but he hooks an arm beneath her thighs to give her a little more stability and doesn't do more than sigh when she kisses his cheek. Kakashi says nothing, very loudly, as he holds the hangings aside for them to step back out into the street, and Kurama glares at him. Hey, it's the dastardly villain who laid me low! A voice full of lazy amusement says before they can take more than a few steps, and Kurama turns in surprise to find a familiar figure behind him, one hand raised in greeting. Sure, he replies dryly, pretending not to notice the way Kakashi has gone stiff beside him. Your head's still in one piece. Genma grins, tapping one temple.
Rado tells me I've got the hardest skull in Konoha.
I'm fine.
You're looking a little less stressed, though. That's good.
Kurama's a little distracted by the fact that Genma is in his Abu uniform, however, even if he has his tiger-painted mask strapped to his belt rather than covering his face.
One brat arching, he pointedly looks Genma over and asks, You were to take me in.
The amusement deepens, and Genma shakes his head, tipping his chin at Kakashi. Sorry, we'll have to have fun with handcuffs another day. Kakashi the Hokage wants to report on the fight immediately.
The fight? Which one?
But despite the dry words, Kakashi is already moving, sliding his book away and turning towards the administration building. 2 steps and he realizes Genma isn't following, glancing back with faint suspicion as he pauses.
Genma?
Genma waves him off. I'm just playing messenger. That your babysitter, Kakashi? Even you can manage to make it to Sarutobi's office without getting sidetracked. I'm about to go on duty. Another fractional pause, and there's something like weary apprehension growing beneath Kakashi's careful stare. But instead of making something of it, he just inclines his head, says, If you get another concussion, it's your own fault, and offers a lazy wave as he walks away. All 3 of them watch him go, and then Fu says, You didn't notice that you helped us in Whirlpool? The smile that Genma gives her is crooked and full of raw humor. I'm a pretty good liar when I need to be. You're Fu, right? Not Taki's container. Not the Nanabi Jinchuriki. And Kurama hadn't really expected either of those titles, but he's still glad Genma didn't use them. He can see by the cheer of her grin that Fu is too. Yeah, she agrees brightly. I used to be Fu of Taki, but now I'm Fu of Kuramani's kids. That gets a laugh from Genma, even as Kurama rolls his eyes, and the Tokujo winks at her. Nice to officially meet you then, Fu. Shiranui Genma. A quick, quasi-casual glance at Kurama, and he tucks his hands into his pockets and then asks lightly, You headed somewhere? I'll walk with you for a bit. It's clear he wants to talk about something, so Kurama nods, setting off after the fading traces of Naruto's chakra.
Did the Hokage really want to see Kakashi, or did you just want to get me alone?
I wouldn't lie about that, Genma protests half-heartedly. Too busy to get caught. And I really do have a mission, but I can put it off for a few minutes. He pauses as they turn down another side street, casting a careful glance over the craggy, greenery-covered buildings around them, and when he's certain they're alone, he says very quietly, You need to keep an eye on Naruto and the other kids, okay? The Hokage has me looking into some things, but if I don't catch something in time. He grimaces around the senbon in his mouth. Between the Hokage prompting this, the Jinchuriki kids being in danger, and Genma acting paranoid in his own village, Kurama doesn't need 3 guesses to figure out what this is about.
Danzo,
he growls just as quietly.
You're looking into him.
Genma blinks, long and slow, and pulls the senbon from his mouth. Yeah, he acknowledges, eyes narrowing. Do I want to ask how you knew that? Kurama ignores that because saying time travel will cause more problems than it solves. He digs into old memories, focusing on the things Sai once told his Naruto, and stops walking for a moment as bits and pieces trickle back. Sai even went back to one of the old bases, long after Danzo was dead and burned to ash, to find all the records from Root's operation in the hopes of locating all the members once the fallout from the war had settled. Naruto hadn't gone with him, but Sakura had, and she and Naruto had talked about it over drinks afterwards. Those are old memories, half faded from alcohol and everything that's happened in between then and now. Still, he's hoping he's remembering correctly, because Sai was one of Naruto's precious people too, and just because Kurama hasn't thought about him yet, doesn't mean doing so doesn't hurt a little. Kurama takes a breath and says,
You know the tunnels in the Hokage Mountain.
There's a moment of silence, and then Genma snorts, clear amusement on his face.
Of course, you know about that too. Yeah, I'm familiar with them. That's where Anbu headquarters is.
Kurama nods because he knows that too. Naruto might not have been Anbu as he was Hokage, and even beyond that, he visited Sasuke down there enough times for Kurama to remember them just as well as if he'd actually been a member.
Past the southern end of the barracks, there's another tunnel that leads out into the forest. One of the Nidame's old labs is nearby.
I've been past there, Genma confirms, hazel eyes steady on Kurama's face.
Pretty place, right? Lots of trees, peaceful and good for relaxing, since no one ever goes there.
Message definitely received. Kurama snorts faintly, but feels a bit of the tension ease out of his shoulders.
Lots of flowers,
he agrees, desk dry. It makes Genma laugh even as he pulls the mask from his belt.
Well, blading flower crowns is the best cure for workplace stress, isn't it? With all the Kumo Nin wandering around, I think it's about time I take it up again. Eyes open, Uzumaki. Same to you.
Kurama returns, but before he's even finished speaking, Genma has his mask on and is leaping for the nearest cluster of hanging roots. He scales them easily, swinging up onto the rooftops in a few easy motions and vanishes from sight. Fu cranes her neck to look at him, expression thoughtful. You like him, don't you, Kuramani?
Sensible people make me happy,
Kurama says, which is more or less an answer. He hitches her up a little higher in one arm and keeps walking, following Naruto's trail. It meanders a little, avoiding big crowds, but it's definitely headed for the field outside the academy, right where he met Kurama for the first time. Still leaning forward over his shoulder, Fu hums. Kanaha is a lot bigger than Taki, she says thoughtfully, and it looks nicer too. Are we going to find a house here?
Honestly, Kurama has no idea. Kushina and Minato's house is gone, destroyed in the Kyuubi attack, and the tiny apartment Naruto used to live in is too small for all 5 of them. 7 even, if Han and Roshi really do end up sticking with them. At this point, Naruto's idea of getting Tenzo to build them one is looking like their best bet. We will, he promises Fu, because there's not really any other choice. He'll try to corner the Hokage before it gets much later and find out, since they finally have the opportunity not to sleep on the ground, and he'd like to take full advantage of it.
Okay,
Fu agrees, as cheerful as ever, and wriggles out of Kurama's hold. Dropping to the ground, she slides around him, then heads for the knot of blonde and red heads at a run, and flings herself at all 3 of them with a war cry. Kurama chuckles a little, watching the 4 go sprawling on the grass with loud complaints and challenging shouts as Fu starfishes out on top of them. There's a wriggle, a twist, and Yugito gets both feet in Fu's stomach and heaves her away, rolling upright only to be tackled by Naruto. She goes down with a cry that sounds like treachery, and Naruto drags Gaara along with him to pin the older girl. It works right up until Fu comes back, scooping the 2 boys up with a whoop and hauling them off. An instant later, Yugito sweeps her legs out from underneath her, and all 4 of them hit the ground again. Ignoring the free-for-all wrestling match, Kurama sinks down under the tree with a swing, leaning back against the smooth bark and scanning the descending darkness. It's an eerie sort of parallel to his first sight of Naruto in this time. Even the weather feels the same, fading sunlight and a touch of cool breeze swaying the branches. This time, though, the sound of laughter and children's voices is all he can hear, and he can't fight his smile as he watches them try and grind each other's faces into the grass. It's probably a little rougher than most academy-age kids would be, but they're Jinchuriki, and they're not afraid to use their strength. Kurama is glad. He's glad they're happy, glad they can be themselves. All of this started because he couldn't leave Naruto on his own, but it's grown from there. Now, in the same situation, he knows full well that he wouldn't leave any of them like that. From the tangle of bodies, Yugito surfaces and scrambles upright. She's breathless with laughter, eyes bright, half of her hair falling out of its braid, and she bolts for Kurama, diving down on his far side. Instantly, knowing exactly what's about to happen, Kurama yelps, shoving her away, but it's already too late. With a round of battle cries, Fu, Gaara, and Naruto hurl themselves at him, tackling him bodily to the ground, and Yugito joins in, laughing like Kurama hasn't heard before. Kurama struggles, growls, tries half-heartedly to shake them off, but there's laughter bubbling in his chest, and actually escaping is pretty much the last thing on his mind.
None of them feel the eyes on them or see the small figure tucked back into the shadow of a doorway, watching their tussle with wide eyes and leaning forward to get a better look. They don't feel the touch of chakra that sparks, near the very quiet, it's pretty and warm, that's lost to the night's breeze as it swirls spiky hair around a pale face. From somewhere deeper in the building, there's a call, short and faintly annoyed, and in an instant the watching eyes are gone.